I could see it, Levi could see it. A pattern was emerging.
What's that deer over in the corner? Running out 2 of them, 3 of them.
Hey, get yourself a leg up for advanced buck hunting techniques by understanding thermal currents, thermal cover, and how different vegetation works on these landscapes. You're gonna have better buck hunting this fall.
Big bucks, they're a totally different critter. When a deer gets 4.5, especially 5, 6, and 7, he has a whole war chest that he can use against you.
This is Deer and Deer Hunting TV. You want to be a more advanced hunter, really understand the flora. The fauna, we understand. We understand deer, well, we try to. We understand their behavior. We understand the other animals and things that are on the landscape. The flora is the most important thing you need to understand. And that is the different tree species, the different shrub species, what they mean to the landscape. It's gonna make you a better deer hunter, but it's also gonna make you a better conservationist. Because once you understand, I know a lot of people say, oh, you don't need to know that. You don't need to understand what Japanese barberry is versus bush honeysuckle or what type of bush honeysuckle that is. I would say you really should know, especially if you're a landowner. If you're not a landowner, you should know, because then you can really weed out the public land that isn't so productive. So it's separating things into preferred species for wildlife, invasive species for the landscape, and understanding how, in this case, the deer relate to them. You know, if you want to become an advanced buck hunter, you kind of got to learn all this other stuff. Yeah, you can take the shortcuts, plant food plots, put your blinds out and kill some deer. I know a lot of guys do that. But over the long haul, I think you're going to be more satisfied if you grasp and understand the whole picture.
Mature whitetails use a variety of habitat depending on where they live. Whitetails in the north woods of Canada use a totally different habitat than the South Texas whitetails. They typically like to be away from people, unless it's an urban whitetail, but they typically like to look for areas where they're not going to be disturbed and thick cover. Now that thick cover could be brush, could be dense timber, but in the Great Plains it could be tall grasses even. So think of these two things: someplace that's not getting disturbed and someplace that has a good cover source that the deer can kind of crawl into.
We're talking about mature bucks, and we're talking about different types of cover that they use. It's all about stem density. That's a fancy way of saying the thick stuff. You need good cover, you need stem density, no matter where you're hunting, to hold mature whitetails. That could be a pine plantation in the south, it could be aspen clear cut in the north, it could be just a cutover of various growth in other parts of the Midwest. That's good stem density. Other things you could have would be conifers. That's your pines, your spruces, your cedars, your swamps, things that are providing thermal cover. Thermal cover is probably one of the most talked about things. It's probably the biggest buzzword in deer hunting these days. It's probably the most misunderstood. So let's define the thermal term here for a second. You have thermal cover and then you have thermals. Thermals is how that air moves across the landscape. Thermal cover is the part of the landscape that is holding heat for deer.
Now that's important for two reasons. Deer look for thermal cover when it's hot. They want to be shaded because typically, especially during hunting season, they're fat and have their parkas on, so they need a little bit of shade if temperatures are at normal or above normal. But they also seek thermal cover in the winter because it's protection from the brutal forces of Mother Nature around them.
Then you can understand where the deer might be holding up, and also you can understand how the air in these areas is affected by that topography and the thermal cover on how you should go about hunting it.
Because at different times of the day, that's where the deer are going to be.
The aspect of deer scouting that really set me over the top is when I learned how mature bucks travel in relation to how younger deer travel and how mature does travel. Mature bucks don't use the same trails as other deer normally. I always have to make that distinction. I always look for those tertiary trails. These trails that you know that a deer has been using it, but not that often, and they're normally on the offshoots of main trails, and they're normally based off of terrain features.
So you always got to be thinking what time of year it is, what are the weather conditions, and what is the hunting pressure. If you add all that together, you can kind of piece together where that buck is going to travel and where he's going to show up.
And that's where knowing ecotones really helps you. Ecotone is just a fancy way of saying where two different types of cover converge. So it could be where a hardwood ridge gives way to a cedar swamp, or where a spruce thicket gives way to some ag. They travel those seams, and that's what I found out for mature deer. Mature deer travel the seams, they stay within a stone's throw of the crowd, but they're always using that really good cover to their advantage because they inherently know there's an X on their back. How they know it, I don't know, but that's how smart they are.
I want to always try to find a way to hunt this deer where I'm going to surprise him. And how do I do that? Well, I like to backdoor deer a bunch. I like to find ways to come in silently, quietly, and undetected. That means scent free, so you got to use products like Scent Killer to erase everything to get into their bedding areas, the edge of their bedding areas, the edge of their food sources where they're not looking. Then you're going to be the surprise and they're going to be the one in the crosshairs. When I draw a tag in South Dakota, it becomes one of my favorite hunts. Why? Well, I get to hunt with my good friend Levi Duncan out of Mobridge, South Dakota. He was not painting me a tale of just deer galore. In fact, it was the opposite. He was not seeing hardly any deer at all. And that's because he figured they had a bad winter kill. Now, this area isn't necessarily known for big deer, but it is known for pheasants. Hidden though, amongst all those pheasants in all the prairie are some great whitetails and even better at times, mule deer. With few deer to see and a lot of open country for them to hide, plus hunting pressure, this hunt was lining up to be a tough one. And I guess I was just gonna have to be the big boy and tough it out.
Deer and Deer Hunting TV is brought to you by
I arrived in Mobridge already with 1 week behind the season. People had been hunting these deer a solid week, including my buddy Levi. So he had a tag, I had a tag, and our first day we decided let's do a lot of high country scanning and scouting. The whitetail rut, the mule deer rut is in full-blown action right now. And the good thing about this first day is, well, Levi said he had seen more deer on that day than he had throughout practically the entire season. Now, there was a lot of questions why we were seeing more deer. The harvest was going and the harvest was screaming and corn was falling all around this country, pushing deer out of the cornfields and into these prairie draws. That was my personal feeling. There was, for the next few weeks that we were looking into the forecast, a lot of rain, a lot of snow, and these farmers knew they had to get the crops out now, and that meant deer dispersion. The next day, our optimism was a touch higher. We had actually seen one good target buck, and as day 2 went along, we were seeing even more deer. And that's when we ran into another target buck and then another target buck. We were actually seeing bucks that I felt we might not even see. I kind of set my sights just a little bit lower on this hunt, again, from all of what Levi was telling me. But as the harvest continued and other hunting pressure on other hunting properties increased, the deer dispersion rate to one of the properties we were hunting, hey, it started to look good. On our next day of hunting, we saw the trend. We knew that this one corner of the property seemed to be holding all of the action. There was an adjoining standing cornfield nearby. There was prairie draws right in front of us. All of this added up to a great whitetail hotspot, a good corner. And why was that? Well, bucks, when they're rutting, when they get a doe that's coming into estrus or in estrus, they like to get away from the crowds. And that's when Levi practically rolled me over and said, "There's a shooter buck." And I just was froze. I did not want to move, and just peeked over, and there on the horizon stood the mature buck we had hoped would show up. He was all by himself though. Then I figured that where he was going, he was going to run out of cover, probably loop around, and at mid-morning, we'd get a much better opportunity. Or maybe side hill right under us, but why would he come that close? Because that's what he wanted to do. There he showed up. And just as he went around that last corner and I slipped the last CX bullet possible into him, I knew he was going to be finished. There was no way any whitetail on earth could take 3 CX Hornady bullets in him and make it very far around that corner.
Well, we had a little chaos here this morning. A big buck come over the horizon and went down these gullies, and you can see there's gullies everywhere, so it's hard to always know what's going on. And Levi said, "That's him, that's the big one." How far close was he?
50?
36, he's right here, 36 yards in front of us. And like you say, they just pop up out of anywhere.
Levi and I, we gathered up our gear, gathered our composure, and made a plan on how to sneak up just to take a peek to make sure he was down for good. There, right below the bank, was the buck that had surprised us, caught us all off guard, but now was mine to tag.
Oh, he's just perfect. Levi Duncan. Just a nice big, let me clear this gun. Nice big prairie whitetail. Look at that. That is what we were looking for. Look at the brows on that thing. Nice main beams, tall points, even his fours are good. Look at that. It's always fun hunting with Levi because we never know what we're gonna find. The only problem is we've got like 16 eroded creeks to get across. If I gotta pack this thing out like an elk, I'm out of here. I'm done whitetail hunting. All right, well, let's get him tagged and let's tag bagged and ready to roll. All right.
You know, hunting was hard. I don't care what anyone says. The hunting pressure was really high this year. Deer densities were low, and this big open country can make finding a whitetail out there like a game of whack-a-mole. You might see him, you might not. But this time, hey, we were successful. We had a miracle, not just one. We had 3 different miracles occur on this hunt. So, miracles do happen.
And this is the perfect day to do some public land scouting. I love doing this, especially midday when I'm at work. Lunch break, got my dry shots in the truck, my game hide, no ticks are getting on me, and I can just wade. This is a nice hard bottom river here. Even the creeks, you just wade that stuff that's adjacent to public land. You find out where those deer are coming from. Gives you great starting spots, especially for the rut when those deer are cruising through here. I'm marking that spot and gonna be hunting that this fall. So where do you start? When you're looking for places where the deer might be coming up on the banks, I call up my hunt stand and I look where the private land is, because normally where there's private land, there's gonna be food and cover and less pressure. And lo and behold, there's some crop fields back this way. They're coming into this lower bottom part, which I know is a bedding area. So that's why I started farther down the river here. And as I get down the river, I'm seeing trails cutting through here like crazy. And if you don't think deer will swim this, you're sadly mistaken. They'll easily swim it, or a lot of times when the water's shallow enough, they'll walk it. So they're coming up here, there's a dynamite spot here. So that's telling me this is more than just a feeding area back there, probably a preferred bedding area. They're coming through here, hitting into the public. A lot of times you're gonna see those deer late morning, early afternoon. You know, they say like 10 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Those are good transition areas, especially as we get closer to November. So if you're like me and you're always itching for new places to hunt, keep a couple things in your truck and you'll be ready to go. A pair of dry shots, some good clothing, especially in the summer. A limit tick will help you out. Maybe a walking stick, and that's all you need, and your imagination. Get out there and explore. So before we talked about the importance of how to apply scent killer to your clothing, your backpacks, your bino packs, your harnesses, even the hard goods like your bipods, your bows, your crossbows, your arrows. Now we're going to talk about the importance of drying it. And it's pretty simple. You just got to make sure it dries nice and evenly and that it actually dries before you put your gear away. The last thing you want to do is either wash your clothes or apply Scent Killer Gold to your clothes or your other products and then not have it dry. Then you're gonna have the opportunity for scent to get back onto that, and that's not what we want. So today, a beautiful sunny day. If I have a clothesline, I'm gonna use that. If I have hooks on a porch, I might use those. For me, I just like using chairs out in the sun. It's a bluebird day out here. Sunny, I can get this stuff out on these chairs, it's gonna dry in no time, and then I know everything is gonna be as scent-free as I can make it.